Amazing, thank you. So hello everyone who might be joining via YouTube on a later date. Welcome to the Lightning Talks 2024 Tech Landscape and What You Should Know. So we have four amazing speakers today. I'm going to give a quick intro to each one before we jump right into the Lightning Talks. So first up, Haley Northrup has been a data scientist at Uplight, a climate technology company based in Boulder, Colorado for 2 years. She also has an undergraduate research experience at the University of Delaware and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, focused on electric vehicles. She has also worked in defense and healthcare industries and holds a master's of electrical engineering from Johns Hopkins University. Next up, we have Angela Dugan. Angela has been in the software world for 25 years, with her experience ranging from software developer to Microsoft evangelist to agile coach and people lead. This year, Angela transitioned back to Microsoft, where she is a leader focused on modern work in the customer success space, serving state and local government agencies. Angela approaches all her roles by fostering an environment where team members can thrive, supporting development of a culture that values diversity, experimentation, and continual improvement. Outside of work, Angela loves playing board games, reading true crime and sci-fi, and is an avid gardener. She and her husband are constantly working on their 100-year-old home with the help of their 3 ornery chickens and their rambunctious rescue dog named Sadie. Next up, we have Terra Cooke. Terra Cooke is a security engineer at Lacework. She's been in the security game for 15 years, and she's here for all things security, technology, and non-performative intersectionality. Oh, and cats. And finally, JooHee Lee, who is a product manager for Chicago-based Civil Health with experience in software development, quality, regulatory, and cybersecurity in the medical device field. As a co-founder of Civil, JooHee wears many hats and loves solving challenging problems. With that, we jump right into our first. Where are you, Haley?
You're also still playing the music in the background, Desiree.
Oh, thank you. And then Haley, it's all you.
Sweet. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Northrup. Thanks for the intro, Desiree. I am a data scientist at Uplight, and I'm going to be talking about climate technology. Next slide. I'm going to give an overview of the company, just to set the scope for some of my work, talk about climate tech in general. I'm going to give a broader overview because even though I work in this space, had to do a bit of Googling to put this together. So I'm assuming a lot of other people need a little more context than just the last couple of years. And then I'll talk a little bit about climate tech skills and careers. So I want to start off with a little icebreaker. I was hoping you all could put in the chat, what do you think of when you hear the phrase climate technology? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So I'm curious kind of where you all are coming from. Ready to go. Give it like 30 seconds to get the ball rolling. Nice. Sweet. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of energy related things, solar panels, electric vehicles, a couple biased inputs from my Uplight colleagues. Thank you. Behavior, decarbonization. And I really like the call out to the future, hope for tomorrow and future generations. Thank you, Brittany, for putting that in. I think the second half of that talk leads more into the future. So I'm excited to dive in a little more deeper. Next slide. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of Uplight. We are a software company based in Boulder, Colorado. The focus of the company is on creating a greener, more sustainable grid. And we do this with partnering with utility companies to provide them products and services in order to engage their customers, so the people who actually pay the energy bills, and to get them to either purchase more efficient products or get involved in programs that helps reduce their energy consumption and things like that. Next slide. So as a data scientist, I work on the kind of back-end models that drive all of those products. So that come in a variety of different flavors. Some of them end up on visualizations on the end products. So are you consuming more than your neighbor? Are you eligible for any products or programs? We do some like targeted marketing, like, oh, you seem to be a customer who would be interested in our EV products because we think you are likely EV owner, and energy forecasting and things like that. So trying to get the energy customers engaged and make decisions to help reduce their energy use. Next slide. So climate tech. In general, climate tech companies develop services and products to leverage the technologies to adapt to climate change. They do this in a couple different ways. So we have carbon dioxide removal or greenhouse gas removal, reducing future emissions, and climate change adaptation. So these are kind of different kind of prongs or approaches to attacking the climate challenges we see in the world. So I want to start with the first wave. So this is what a lot of you all alluded to, was this energy-focused clean tech kind of wave in the 2000s, early 2010s, where the focus was on clean technology, investment and development. So we see a lot of solar, wind, battery storage, biofuel, regulations focused on reducing pollution and things like this. So getting factories to put filters on and things like that. So this is kind of the first wave of that technology. And then moving forward, we have this transitional period between wave 1.0 and 2.0. And these are just terms I saw on the internet. Next slide. But a lot has changed in the last 10 was just a number I picked, but 10, 5, 15 years that really has shifted the climate tech space. So this would include like a market shift due to decreasing costs in solar and wind. So now that's cheaper than coal, which makes it more desirable. Battery demand and EV demand has increased kind of together. And we also see the cost of EVs coming down a little bit. We see an opinion shift with the acceptance of climate change kind of broadly throughout the media, the general population, some politicians, organizations, and things like that. And they, in turn, are making all these public and private climate pledges to say, oh, we're going to be net zero by 2050 or 2045, or we're going to use more sustainable products, or we're going to clean up our supply chain. You see all this stuff all over the news and the media and on corporate websites and things like that. And we also have this third thing that has been happening, which is regulation. So the Paris Agreement, US Inflation Reduction Act. Sorry, I wrote my notes on this slide. Bipartisan infrastructure law and things like that are really pushing forward like the intentionality in this space and setting the bar for corporations and other governments as well. So now we are moving into Climate Tech 2.0, as the people on the internet like to call it. Next slide. So this is kind of where we are now and going into the future. So we have a broader scope of the technologies we're looking at to address climate change, a greater focus on mitigating emissions and adapting and being more resilient as climate change is upon us. And I found in one article that there are 2,800 climate companies globally, and that's a lot. I was pretty surprised by that number as well. So we have this graph on the right just to kind of ground us in. There's greenhouse gas emissions in every sector. Like you can't just isolate to be like, oh, energy is so dirty or transportation's so dirty. It's like every single sector is touched by the climate crisis and emits these greenhouse gases. So climate tech can address challenges in all of these spaces. So we see energy, transportation, industry, and manufacturing, new carbon markets emerging, which is super interesting, circular economy, retail, all of this stuff is touched by climate tech and can be involved in climate tech. So that's why I wanted to give a more general talk, because climate tech is everywhere, and it can be anywhere and everywhere, and that's super cool, but also overwhelming. So I want to ground that in a couple examples. Carbon market, it means like carbon accounting. So like what carbon are we emitting or greenhouse gases, and how can we reduce it? So there are companies that are focused on just that first piece. How do we quantify the carbon that a certain company is emitting, and where along their production chain or processes is that happening? Circular economy, so that's what I think of, like repurposing, upcycling, things like that. So you see some companies that you can pay to take your clothing and then they'll upcycle it into like insulation for buildings and things like that. And those are kind of that circular economy space, or reusing an EV battery for solar later. Like, how do we kind of get more use out of the products we make? Energy, I think everyone's pretty well grounded in energy, solar, wind, energy efficiency products, batteries, things like that. Transportation, we have EVs, shared vehicles, logistics, transportation planning. Agriculture is super interesting. We have precision agriculture, crop yield monitoring from geospatial satellites, and among other things. You know, how do we optimize the crops and how they're transported around the world? And then industrial manufacturing, supply chain optimization. Any company that buys anything is part of a supply chain. And then lastly, yeah, industry, we have automation in general, preventative maintenance, and all of these things can be sensors or code or an app or yeah, a lot of software in all of these pipelines as well. Next slide. So climate is awesome. I would argue climate is sexy. And maybe you want to get involved involved in a climate career at some point. I found this from a YouTube video, to be frank, and it was just kind of a broad scope of like, what do you need to be, transition to a climate career or start a climate career? And a lot of the roles are the same. You see data analysts, you see data scientists, you see software, you see product manager, and all of those types of roles in a lot of these companies. But since the industry is growing so much, that you may not necessarily need climate experience in order to enter the climate field. So you find a role with the same title, a lot of those transferable skills are going to be there, and you don't necessarily need the climate experience. However, in order to stand out when you apply, you can also highlight your interest in climate, and you can do that in a number of ways. And I put a couple here, and I have some resources in case anyone wants to learn more about climate networks. And I know, Desiree, you're connected to one of those climate job network pages as well. So she's a great resource for that. What companies are hiring? So this is something I found interesting. The first wave of clean tech or climate tech that I talked about, solar, wind, energy, all that stuff, those companies are more mature and they've had time to grow and scale, and they need more people to kind of support those companies. So because they're bigger, there are probably more roles at those kinds of companies. And when you're looking at this in this space for jobs, but there are many other jobs as well. Yeah, and where should you look for jobs? You can look at all the classic sites, but there's also climate specific job boards and industry groups and organizations and Slack channels and all those good things as well. Next slide. So in summary, I think, this is my personal opinion, climate tech is exciting and a growing field. It spans so many industries that, whatever your interest is and however you want to tackle it, you can jump right in. And there's a high demand for those technical skills that we all have. And you don't necessarily need prior experience to join the field, which I think is really nice because sometimes there's that barrier to entry. Another thing I just wanted to add before I wrap up is, if you're interested in climate or sustainability, there's a lot of ways you can bring those practices into your current role. So you don't necessarily have to be in the climate tech field in order to be someone who promotes like efficiency, sustainability, and stuff like that at your own company. I use a lot of compute resources in my job, and it's very easy to use more than you need. So yeah, it's just kind of a mindset shift as well. You can kind of bring into your own roles right now. So that's all I have. Here are some resources that I mentioned, like jobs, networking pages, certifications, things like that. Some podcasts that are recommended by some of the marketing managers at my company. And then the last slide is just kind of links for all the information that I presented in this talk. Thanks for listening, guys.
I have to find myself. Thank you, Haley. We'll also feel free to, well, not feel free, we'll also be sharing these out afterwards. So if anyone also has any questions about that, please feel free to add them in the group chat or in the Q&A. So moving on. That was up, no, yes. Okay. Angela, it's all you.
Thank you. Trying to get unmuted. Technology. Well, thank you for introducing me earlier. So again, my name is Angela Dugan. I recently rejoined Microsoft after a brief 13-year hiatus to go into consulting. I work in the state and local government space, which is an interesting place to be when it comes to AI, because there's a lot of conservatism and some nervousness there. So I like to talk about it. We focus on modern work, so that's going to be Copilot and all of the ways that it interacts with Office 365 and productivity tools like that. So this particular topic is very relevant to me, as well as just about everybody in the knowledge work field these days. So let's move on to the topic. So there's a lot of kind of FUD out there about how AI is going to take our jobs, right? Some of the claims are ridiculous. It's easy to blow them off and think that's just science fiction. But some of the recent AI advancements that I'm seeing, they definitely can start to feel legitimately concerning, right? Both in their possibilities for what it can mean for the world, but also the possibilities on how it could maybe elbow into your career for real. So I'm hoping after this talk today, you'll see that AI doesn't have to be a threat, and there are ways to take advantage of it. There's some amazing opportunities that AI can present to us. So I like to think of it more as a tool that can help us superpower our career instead of destroying it. So next slide. So I'm also here to say whatever you're feeling about AI is valid. My goal today isn't to convince you that it is the second coming, that you should be super excited and not have any nervousness about it. Whatever you feel is fine, right? At the same time, I always encourage people to pivot their thinking away from AI as the enemy, right? Something to be fought or resisted, because resistance is futile here. Like AI is already happening, it's coming, right? And whether or not we embrace it, it's going to become part of our lives. So the best thing we can do is figure out how to work with it, how to control it, maybe isn't the right word, but how to integrate it in a healthy way. Because when you think about the time frame of AI, it's important to understand that it's pretty new and constantly evolving. So 2 years ago, it was barely a twinkle in anyone's eyes, except for a few engineers. Most companies had no idea what to do with it, how to implement it, let alone use it or integrate it into their business. And I can tell you from my experience already with some of my clients, it's still true. People are not sure what to do with it. November of 2022, which may feel like a lifetime away, but was only about a year and a half ago, right? I'm like, oh, even I got to think of that math. That's when ChatGPT was launched. That's what a lot of people are familiar with when it comes to AI, and everybody kind of freaked out a little bit, right? There were blog posts and stories about the downfall of tech, all of our jobs, society as a whole. Now, don't get me wrong, right? There's certainly some potential long-term socioeconomic concerns that we don't have time to dig in on today. So for this talk, I'm just going to focus on how it impacts all of us, right? All of us knowledge workers who are working in technology and are looking at this new thing coming along that maybe has the potential to threaten us. So again, it can be easy to be anxious about something like AI. It feels indistinguishable from magic sometimes. So the first thing I like to do is to demystify it a little bit. Next slide. So there's a lot of ways to experience AI. I'm going to focus on ChatGPT as a vehicle for explaining it because it's a pretty commonly used interface. There are certainly some other ones, right? Some people are probably more familiar with Bard and some of the other ones out there. ChatGPT is the one I tend to use the most. So what I want to do is kind of break it down from the perspective of what ChatGPT does, because I think it's a good example of what AI can actually do. So the GPT in ChatGPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. So let's break that down. So generative, it can generate responses to human prompts. Based on statistical relationships that it is aware of between words, it can answer questions for you. So these responses will actually feel kind of human because of the generative tools. So maybe you're asking it to generate an idea for what to make for dinner tonight, or a great recipe for a from scratch marinara, right? You can do that. You can go to ChatGPT and ask those questions. It'll generate pretty good answers that also happen to sound like your best friend sending it to you over email or chat. Now you might be thinking like, okay, but where does all this data come from? So the pre-trained part of it, that's where that comes in. So what ChatGPT is aware of comes from word associations based on what it's been trained to know from answering other people's questions. So it can search social media, Wikipedia, news articles, code repositories. There's dozens and dozens of things it can access over the internet for publicly available information. It's kind of like a sophisticated version of Let Me Google That For You, although I may be dating myself by saying that. I don't know if people still use Let Me Google That For You, but it's something we used to use when people would ask us a question. We're like, oh my God, let me type that into Google and hand you the answer. It's effectively what ChatGPT is doing for us, but in a very conversational way. So it's provided through past experiences, through all of those data sources from all the other people who've interacted with it, asking about dinner, asking about marinara. It starts to build up a database of potential answers. Now, the cool thing about that is those dinner ideas that you're getting came from what it learned when someone else asked it that exact same question or something pretty darn close to that 5 minutes ago, which was informed by all of the answers to similar questions that it's been doing for the last 18 months. When you get that answer back, you can thumbs up, you can ask for new ideas, you can push back, you can thumbs down. And guess what? All of that is information that gets fed into the tool that it can use to generate new answers. Now, the flip side of that is it's also a garbage in, garbage out system. So transformer is the last piece. So this is where things get pretty complicated. Like, I'm not an engineer, right? I'm not here to talk about like large language models and pull up really fantastic diagrams of how all the math works, right? Just know that it's an architectural model that can process all of that data and the stuff that it's learning to perform kind of natural language processing tasks. So what that means is it can do things like leverage the context of the conversation to know the difference between bear, like B-A-R-E, and B-E-A-R, right? So it can start to get a little smart that way. It can also use statistical weighting to go, I got more thumbs up when I answered that question this way than that way. So I'm going to make sure I keep telling people that. So it uses context weighting. That's what allows it to know that if I ask for a good idea for dinner, it's not going to give me a chair or a bag of rocks, although technically edible, right? Those are not great answers. People are not going to like those. It is going to be way more likely to say something like spaghetti and meatballs, because a lot of people were like, oh yeah, that sounds good. That's a pretty good dinner. Now, it's not necessarily going to give you eggs, although I do love me some breakfast for dinner, right? Less people are going to say they like that. So it's going to be more likely to give you the common answer. So that is one of the things we'll talk about. It's a little bit of a downfall sometimes in that it tends to lean towards giving the answers out that are going to be accepted by more people. That's literally how it's trained. That's how it knows it's the right thing. Next slide, please. So knowing all of this, right, this is where I always kind of joke, we've got some time before I have to call into Hamilton here. There's a lot of shortcomings still, right? It can do some really, truly amazing things, but let's summarize what we just talked about, right? AI is not the same as human intelligence. It's a very sophisticated model that doesn't really understand facts or concepts, just relationships between words. You ask this question, these answers tend to be good. It doesn't actually know that spaghetti and meatballs is food that we can ingest. It also gives impressions of answers, right? So again, it doesn't know what a good or a bad answer is, only what people tend to react to. So it's almost like a sophisticated mockingbird that's just kind of spitting stuff back at you based on what it's heard. Now, tools like ChatGPT also don't know good data from bad data when forming answers. It only knows what tends to look correct or sound correct. So this is one of the aspects of AI that really kind of blew my mind when I learned it. So it has kind of a confidence rating that it uses to determine like what answer is going to be the best answer to give. Now you might hear that and go like, oh, a confidence rating, like it's pretty confident that that's a good answer. That's not actually what the confidence rating is. A confidence rating is how confident is the AI that you as a human are going to accept its answers correct, whether or not it's actually correct. I thought that was pretty interesting, right? Because again, keep in mind, it is pre-trained with all of that information by humans, right? Humans who are fallible, biased, don't always know all the answers. So we don't know if AI is providing bad data to us necessarily, unless we already know what the correct answer is. So I always say trust but verify. Now, the last thing is that the intelligence in AI, again, is kind of mimicking human intelligence, but a couple of the shortcomings, the things where this is where I get a little less nervous about it, is it can't effectively mimic emotional intelligence, emotional maturity. It can't show empathy or compassion. And those things, regardless of all of the like stereotypes, are a big part of our jobs, even if we're in IT. Next slide. So to summarize, AI sometimes, despite its best intentions, just outright lies to us, does so very confidently. You can't just blindly trust it yet. It's trained by humans, so it can be biased because humans can be biased and incorrect sometimes. And the data is strong if you go really far back because people have asked the same questions over and over. But if you ask about an event or a thing that's fairly new, say something that just happened within the last 6 weeks or 6 days, AI is unlikely to know about it yet. So it's very powerful at offering ideas, effective at responding consistently to well-known questions and answers, has a large language model for simplifying things. And if we think about how it can help us with our jobs, next slide. Some of the things that it can do for you is it can help you schedule meetings. It can give you facilitation ideas. It can give you one-on-one topics if you're new to being a manager. It can summarize established theories or frameworks or models that you're trying to learn as part of a new job, but you don't want to read the encyclopedia. You want to get the Cliff Notes. It can generate that for you. And because so many people are able to give it input, you automatically are getting more diverse experiences and thoughts and ideas given back to you than you would have if you were to just work in a silo. So I've gotten a ton of value out of AI tooling and what it can do for us as a manager, teammate, even a partner at home. Great dinner ideas. So I think there are a lot of great ways that you can leverage AI. Don't let it scare you. Find ways to help it supercharge your career. And if you're looking for some resources to start, because it can be pretty overwhelming, the last slide has some of the materials that I was using to get trained up. So there's a Microsoft Learning Hub, a couple of good articles, a place to get started with ChatGPT. So that is my lightning talk on how AI is going to help you boost your career.
Thank you. That was great. I really love learning. I feel like I've had a few AI chats and I learn something new every time because it's such an interesting topic. Well, jumping right into the next one, which is a little near and dear to my heart since cybersecurity was the first tech job I ever had. Terra, it is all you. I'm asking you to unmute now, hopefully.
Yes, I am good to go. Hi, hello everyone. If I yawn or you have seen me yawn, I'm in Iceland right now. It is, I don't know what time, almost midnight. So took a nap so I could be here. Glad to be here, but I am not bored or no one has bored me. It is just almost nap time. So I use she, her pronouns, and also thank you for the introduction earlier, Desiree. And I'm here to talk about what the security landscape for 2024 looks like. Who am I? I'm this cute little emoji that I like. It's not an emoji, it's a picture, whatever, that I like to use. So just some background context on me. I've been in the security realm for about 15 years now, even back before cybersecurity was like formally a thing. I'm going to date myself. And when it was still information security. And then at some point, there was the war between information security versus cybersecurity, and I hated cyber, and now that's just what it is. And here I am. So I'm a security engineer at Lacework, which is a cloud security monitoring company. Specifically, I focus on our governance, risk, and compliance efforts. And that's also where I've spent the majority of my career now because that's just what I love. I'm a LinkedIn Learning instructor. I have a course out right now about HIPAA compliance, and I have another course coming out later this year if you would like to take a look at any of those. And I can't say what my next course is about yet, but no, it's cool. Yay. Magical Girl, that's just like how I refer to myself. I'm a very big anime fan. When Desiree asked, like, what are we reading? I'm not reading real books, I'm reading manga. I just finished catching up on Jujutsu Kaisen, and it's a nail biter. And now I'm catching up on Black Clover, which I was literally doing until I had to like come to this, and I was like, ah. And then I love cats. I miss my cat, and I miss her a lot. Her name is Izzy, and I'm always glad to talk to anyone about my cat. So before I go to my next slide, a little drum roll about what this topic could be about. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Next slide. AI. So it's actually super convenient that mine is right after Angela's. So I was like, oh, cool. This is like how I get to queue myself up really well. Mine is going to be obviously more within the lens of how AI is impacting the security realm. And my lens will even more so probably focus in that governance, risk, and compliance area because that is just where I spend most of my time. So one of the big things that we have been having a lot of conversations about within the security and the legal realm is people using different, let me rephrase. So there's open AI and there's closed AI, and I'm going to try and make sure I get this as right as humanly possible. Haha, humans, jokes. So for open AI, that's things like ChatGPT, some of the other ones that are out in the world, and they are learning based off of that publicly available data, like Angela mentioned. And then there's closed AI, which is behind something. So companies are taking some of the steps to actually create their own closed AI systems within their company so people can just learn better either about their own product or something that they're offering within their product. So their customers can just go and ask questions. But again, very important to note that it is behind something. It is not openly available to the public. Companies have been having issues with their employees going out to open AI and just being like, I need this very specific thing, but it's about their job, it's about their company, and it's potentially proprietary data or confidential data or something that you don't want out to the public for AI to learn from it and then go run off to the masses and the races. So one thing that I always make sure to point out as we are getting more into the AI world, and like Angela said, there's nothing we can do about it. Like it's here, it's cool. I have not used it for work yet. I have used it for a couple of different things, and I will say was very impressed. Like I had to write up like a vendor perspective, and I was like, here's 5 tiers and some stuff. I don't really know. And it gave it back. And I was like, oh, great. You saved me like 3 hours of literally thinking. In about 30 minutes, I had it done. So that was nifty. But be careful about the data that you are putting in there, especially as it relates to your job and your company, because you don't want it to ultimately feed that data to other places, competitors, or just in general, you don't want it outside of your environment. And forbid that it is found out by your company, because then that gets into if you signed an NDA or any sort of code of conduct and things of those natures, they can come back to you and do whatever is in their code of conduct or NDAs about punishments for, releasing confidential or proprietary data, which as a compliance person, I always unfortunately put up to termination. And you don't want to get terminated over an accident. Like that'd be really crappy. So be mindful about that. Also, just like AI is still very much the wild, wild west as far as security is concerned. And is it actually secure? What does it mean to have secure AI? If memory serves correct, within the past couple of weeks, there's been some vulnerabilities that were actually pointed out specifically for ChatGPT. I did not read about it super in depth, but it is still tech, it is still data, it is still code at the end of the day. So who is out here monitoring these different frameworks or bodies or models, what have you, to ensure that they are actually secure in a way that is beneficial and helpful to the people that are using it? Again, you don't want certain data just going out there to the public. And while it's great to a certain degree, because like Angela said, as it's getting all this data, it knows how to refine its answers and thus give you better answers. You probably don't want certain information about yourself out there. Or worse, if that code is ultimately vulnerable and vulnerabilities are exploited, I don't think we actually know the depths of what exploited AI means at this stage in the game. Like, how can you, are there ways, for instance, to, which I'm going off the top of my head because I actually haven't thought super in depth about this. If, for instance, you're able to exploit certain parts of AI where it can inject something malicious into a link, a folder, a file, a something, and then you click on it because you're asking it to, send you to a place potentially. Well, now you have a problem on your hands. Or just other really interesting things that I just think we have not had a chance to go super in depth with it about. That we have a lot of conversations within the security realm. And then from specifically a governance, risk, and compliance sort of area, it's a lot of risk and it's a lot of unknown risk that companies are, in my opinion, not quite willing to undertake, which I'm proud of that the company itself won't until they do appropriate risk assessments and things of that nature. But that doesn't mean that their employees are not going out and doing it anyway, because we've all been there. We've all probably done it ourselves. So people may have actually started to see, very interestingly, what is it? Chief Artificial Intelligence Officer roles popping up. I've started to see Microsoft, as a matter of fact, has some AI governance like program manager positions and roles. So now there's this shift in the space of more AI-based roles, which is great because someone still needs to maintain AI. Like, it can only take away all of our jobs to a certain degree. Someone still has to like love it and nurture it and give it a hug when it breaks. And you need a human for that, or at least that's my assumption, and that's what I'm going to roll with. So there have been conversations. Is it necessary to actually have full on like a whole new section for AI in the tech space when that could potentially be rolled into a security role? It could potentially be rolled into an AI role. With the current job landscape, anything that's going to generate more jobs, I'm very like pro for. So I don't have any real strong feelings either which way there. But companies do have to take a step back before they allow people to just use it without stopping, pausing, and creating real governance around it. Like, what does it mean to use AI? What are appropriate uses? What are inappropriate uses? How are we going to build models for this, whether whether open or closed AI? Who manages it? Like, there's so many different ways and things that need to be addressed before I feel like companies can really sink their teeth into. And I will say I'm very proud again of a lot of places being like, let's pause before we do this, because I feel like the security industry and tech industry as a whole has been like, oh my gosh, there's this new shiny thing, let's go do it without thought. And then we have repercussions, and then we're playing like this really fun game of being like, oh shit, what do we do now? We are being very reactive instead of proactive. So that's a huge positive in my place. Very much a cat and mouse game, or just like the carrot and stick game. I don't know if AI is the carrot or the stick at this point. I'll see how much I change my opinion in about, I'll say 3 months. But again, just as a whole within the security community, I don't have a lot of like fancy slides or anything. I literally was just like, all everyone is talking about right now is AI. That's it. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. And trying to get people to stop like going out and putting their company information on the internet. Also, just as a plug, stop using Grammarly. It's a keylogger. It's not great. It's basically a keylogger. Like, don't use it because it does like collect all of your data. I'm just throwing it out there as a like early AI. It's not even AI. It's just, that's not why we're here though. Anyway, that's all that I have. Someone did ask me about my LinkedIn learning thing. If you add me on LinkedIn, my name is Terra Cooke, as spelled out here. You can add me at any time, and I'm happy to share it with you. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Tara. It's always so interesting. I really appreciated you talking about proactive being versus reactive, because I really hope we as a whole in the tech community can start being a little more proactive versus reactive, especially in security, but also just generally. So last but not least, we have JooHee. I'm handing it over to you, and you're unmuted. Amazing.
All right, so hello everyone. My name is JooHee, and today I'm excited to share with you the trends in healthcare technology landscape for 2023 and 2024. Next slide. I'm currently a co-founder and product manager for a medical device startup, Cyber Health, based here in Chicago. We make flexible wireless sensors and patient monitoring products for clinical care and also clinical trials and research products as well. Next slide. So 2023, so let's look at what some of the current trends are by looking at what happened last year. Next slide. If we're talking about technology in 2023, we have to talk about AI and its influence in healthcare. And when I talk about a rise, I'm referring to actual adoption of technology, not just research, not just proof of concept you can tinker around with, but actual deployment. So in 2023, there has been big movement for using AI for reducing administrative burden. So things like patient charts, documentation, basically sitting in front of a screen and manually typing away. So as an example, ambient clinical voice. So here's an AI that listens to the physician while they're talking to the patient. And AI-driven tools like ambient listening can transcribe consultations directly into the EHR, electronic health records, and reducing manual input, allowing more patient interaction. Computer-assisted coding is another example. Coding in this case refers to a little bit different thing in healthcare rather than coding as we know it. But basically, it's able to go through kind of a massive amount of data in the patient's health records and help the decision-making process around different appropriate hospital reimbursement. So all of these solutions are helping today to address some of these issues with workforce burden that's so prevalent today. Next slide. We are also getting AI models that are targeted more towards the healthcare industry. So as an example, MedPalm 2 from Google can answer questions about a wide range of medical topics, diseases, treatments, and protocols. And as we think about how we can translate this technology into a product, the challenge really lies into finding quantifiable impact. This has on kind of hard dollar metrics like labor savings and revenue generation. But as with any AI work, we want to look at this with caution as AI comes with its own problems. As always, bias is a problem with anything involving data. We want to make sure we go towards the direction of health equity and minimize potential digital divides. And then there's also, with AI, there's a black box problem. Will clinicians follow recommendations that they don't understand? And trust becomes a bigger issue, not only between the physician and the AI at work, but between the patient and the physician as well. So let's say the accuracy becomes 99%, they're correct. And at that point, is the physician actually paying attention and reading the generated report, right? Because it is correct 99% of the time. And are they paying attention before they approve? And can the patient trust the doctor that uses AI? Okay. So interesting kind of concept to think about here. Next slide. Okay. COVID-19 has definitely advanced the adoption of telehealth within the general public, and it's really normal nowadays to pull up your phone, talk face-to-face with the doctor. So telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, that is kind of the new normal now. So in the past year, we've seen, in the past year, 2023, we've seen a lot of companies branch out into this world of home health. So what's most interesting to me is that these companies that make consumer products are creating actual medical devices and choosing to take a long and slow road of regulatory path with FDA approvals and clearances. So uses of medical devices in the home can support more comfortable and convenient patient care, but it's not without risk. So your average user won't have the expertise and may not have the expertise to operate them properly or really interpret the data that's presented by them as well. So usability engineering with these considerations become key here. Next slide. We are also seeing everywhere apps that provide virtual assistance to patients in scheduling appointments, navigating the healthcare system, providing basic instructions for managing health and wellness remotely. So nowadays, if you need medical care, you're really likely to see someone hand you a tablet or download an app that manages kind of all the logistics. So here we can observe that there are some responsibilities around healthcare administration and management that are shifted more towards the patient. And it seems like there's a good acceptance from the patient around this shift as well. Next slide. So we have this boom in remote care and a growing adoption in healthcare technology by the average person, but there has been some challenges for digital therapeutics last year. So digital therapeutics, these are software-based solutions designed to treat, manage, and prevent medical conditions, diseases. You commonly see products that address mental or behavior health in the field here. Example, Keeley with their Endeavor product to treat ADHD. This year, they're announced they're moving from the prescription business model over to the over-counter model. So the average person can access without a doctor's prescription. For paramedical, they went into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So paramedical, they were developing software treating problems like opioid use disorder, insomnia. And if you look at their history, their clinical evidence was one of the strongest in the field. They had more than 40 published studies, including several randomized trials. And many of these were published in high quality and well-respected journals as well. So as a new type of medicine modality, you can see adoption is a major problem in space in general. And these cases show that digital therapeutic products need not only to show their clinical benefit, but also the direct benefits to payers, like insurance companies that pay for healthcare. Next slide. So 2024, what do we need to know? Next. So value-based care. So this has been a slower rollout since the Affordable Care Act back in 2010. But we are seeing more work towards value-based healthcare being in the work for the past 10 years, building on the work that has been happening in the past 10 years or so. So traditional fee-for-service model, you can see it charges patients for every CT scan, every blood draw and surgery, kind of every incident. But value-based healthcare goes towards where they're measuring things like number of readmissions, mortality, patient experience surveys, patient-reported outcomes. So we're moving from focusing on the quantity of care to the quality of care. And why is this important? Well, in the realm of treatment and diagnosis, at least in the US, healthcare operates under a reimbursement-driven model. So without coverage from payers like insurance companies or Medicare, or unless you have real life evidence of ROI, return on investment, there's going to be no adoption in technology. Next slide. This past year, we've seen, and just the tip of the iceberg on what AI can do for healthcare. We're actually seeing practical applications around virtual assistants, around clinical administration and documentation, and things are only going to get better. More controversial is the extent to which AI will influence actual clinical decisions. Right. So AI technology will be used by clinicians to provide increasingly personalized care to patients. Right now, we know AI can't replace the clinical judgment of skilled physicians, but I'm excited to see the products that will be coming out for physician enablement. Next slide. So considerations if you want to make or deploy technology in healthcare. First is that the effectiveness of healthcare is being quantified and measured differently, and we're kind of moving away from reactive care instead of kind of preventive and proactive care. Second is technology is everywhere, and hospitals are now coming to home, and in fact is at home. Third, you can't have one-off software systems that operate in isolation. I'm sure you can have remote care and use the apps that the average person or the phone that the average person has, but that means nothing if that data is siloed. And lastly, AI is starting to get smart or make it smart, but there are things to accept around the acceptance of technology and responsibilities surrounding it. And as always, governance is catching up as well with regulations coming. I think there was a recently 900-page review on European AI kind of laws as well. So it's definitely catching up and it'll be here soon. Next slide. And that's it. All right. Thanks everyone for listening in.
Thank you, JooHee. All right, we are a couple minutes till our technical end. So quickly going to do some of the slides before we jump into Q&A. We will be recording Q&A, so if y'all have to hop off, no worries, he'll be able to see what was talked about afterwards. So quickly go through the rest of the slides. Ways to stay connected. Thank you all. Thank you to the speakers. This was a phenomenal talk. I loved it. I can't believe an hour has gone by. Ways to connect with us either through our website. Chicago has an Instagram. New York City, we have a Slack, which I think I have the link to. Yes, feel free to join us. And we always look for ways to improve and would love your feedback for today's event. Feel free to grab that. We'll also grab the link and can add that in the Slack. And with that, I believe that's the last slide. So I'm going to stop sharing and we can start diving right into the Q&A. And Andrea, I don't know if we have any queued up, but if any of y'all have a question, please feel free to add it into the chat now.
Laka, were there any questions that came in through the Q&A or the chat?
And while we are, we've got one. What are the climate certificates? Good question. Haley, is there anything at a high level to kind of explain what that means?
Haley's currently muted. Let me, oh, there she.
Yeah, I saw that on the Canary Media YouTube kind of talk. Canary Media is a outlet for kind of energy company and the field and industry. They talked about climate certifications just as a way to just become more aware of the space. I don't think it's officially like leveling up your career, like, no, I'm certified to do Python. I think it's just more like getting a notch on your resume to say, I'm just more aware of what's going on in this space. They recommended one in particular and they mentioned it a few times. So that's the one I linked. I did a quick Google and I didn't see a ton of others and I'm not sure if it's free or paid. So more digging around on the internet might be needed there, but it's linked in my slides.
Also not necessarily a certificate, but I know there's one, I also volunteer for Work on Climate, which is another nonprofit community that focuses on climate. One of the things they've been pushing is, not pushing, but a lot of people have taken was Terra.io, I think, which has a lot of courses on tech specific stuff for climate, like what the tech stack, among other courses. I can grab that real quick. But those are paid. I haven't done it, but I know my current team lead, she's really enjoying one of the courses she's doing. I guess while we're waiting for other questions, one question that I kind of have for the group itself. Oh, wait, we got another one before mine. So what specific technical skills in general or specific to a field do you believe will be important to have in 2024? And why is it most likely going to be AI related? That is just a side note on me. But I'm gonna also just, whoever wants to jump in on that specific question, feel free.
I mean, personally, I think understanding the capabilities of the AI tools out there, right? There's OpenAI, there's frameworks you can write code directly against. There's tools like Copilot that kind of plug into Excel, Visual Studio, PowerPoint, you name it. I think being familiar with those tools is going to be great, not only because it's going to help you be more productive. I mean, just like the meeting summary alone that happens in Teams is like worth its weight in gold. But there's going to be a lot of companies out there who are like, I'm trying not to be ungenerous. They're going to take stabs at it and just try to use it because all the magazines and blogs are like, oh, it's the cool hotness, you have to be using it. I really want to make sure that everyone using it is conscientious and informed. And I think we can help with that. We can say like, hey, I think we should use AI. And here's some ideas for how it would be like responsible and productive versus slapping into the company and having everyone kind of freak out and not know how to use it. So I think familiarity with any of that is already going to give you a leg up in kind of managing up and helping to inform the decisions your company is making.
Thanks, Angela. And then I know, Tara, you rose your hand for that, and I'm also going to ask you the next question of what would be your guess on how to make AI more secure? Would it become locally hosted? Would questions be screened ahead of time?
So I feel like locally hosted would not actually be helpful, like broad scale for AI, just because it's local. But the biggest things I feel like would be figuring out what languages like these different models are built off of and trying to understand, like, ultimately, is it secure code, which is a very broad spectrum, like answer, because are you doing static code analysis? Are you doing like real-time code analysis as things like warp and change? But like just a quick Googling, ChatGPT is basically built off of Python. Great. Python is Python. I'd like to lie and say that I'm a programmer or like well-versed in programming languages of any sort. I'm not. They frustrate me. I spent probably just 30 minutes, 40 minutes earlier today in SQL and wanted to bang my head in. So I would like to make that as like a caveat, but to at least be able to utilize like whatever skills you do have in a language to just assess it for your own understanding. And I mean, it is nice considering there are plenty of bug bounty programs out there. I don't know if there are actually any based off of like for ChatGPT, since most bug bounties are just based off of like a company doesn't want to pay vulnerability management people. Get a spicy take as I start to get tireder. I'm so sorry. No disrespect to any companies out there. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But that would be my assessment of just like understanding based off of that code base, like what does secure code look like? Going back to your old school security principles of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, is availability really that important for AI? Debatable, depends on how like heavily integrated in your environment it is. But the confidentiality and especially the integrity aspect of that data that it's spitting back out at you is something that I feel like very much needs to be honed in on. And then where ownership is right, like get your ownership credits. Because that's the other scary thing about AI is once it gets into open AI, who owns it? Unknown unknowns.
I had another question that came in through the Q&A that is on a related topic. So from a high level, what are the panelists' thoughts on how ethics should be incorporated within AI's role in evaluating, diagnosing, treating, et cetera, in healthcare? And I will toss that over to you, JooHee. Here, can I take you off mute? I'm on a Zoom.
Oh, thank you. So the question was asking about evidence for
how should ethics be incorporated within AI's role in evaluating, diagnosing, and treating in health?
Yes. So you know, this is kind of there's two ways around this, or two ways of thinking around this. One is around you know, when we create models or when we create systems that are able to interpret data and produce kind of information that us humans can interact with, we have to make sure that the data set we use, you know, are not only limited to a specific population, but consider kind of geographic differences, racial differences, and various differences that might vary between kind of the different areas that we are providing care, and make sure that we don't introduce bias and uphold that bias while we're kind of testing and developing kind of these tools as well. The other is around health, I guess, equity and or ethics, where we want to make sure that healthcare is, you know, available, even, you know, if you're not in a, you know, connected area, or maybe you don't have the technology available or skills available to access these kind of new tools. And so this is becoming an increasing concern, but this is already a concern in areas like low and middle income countries, where, you know, you might not have the, you know, a network or the internet you need to access what you need. So I think this is really around, you know, making sure you understand the kind of deployment environment that you're deploying your healthcare tool or product in, and making sure kind of you address these concerns as you're developing the product.
Thanks, JooHee. I'm just checking back. I know we're gonna close out a little soon since we're almost at 10 minutes over. Andrea, unless you saw one in particular, there was a previous question that stated, I have interest from Paula. I have an interest to starting their journey as a data analyst in healthcare and cybersecurity. Do you recommend us to work on some projects for our portfolios to stand up as a great candidate? I just finished my master's degree as a data analyst engineer in DC. Congrats. So that would JooHee or Terra, asking both of you to unmute, feel free.
Yeah, sure. I can kind of speak to that a little bit. So if you want to develop with a product in healthcare, or kind of show off your skills in healthcare, you will most likely consider kind of integration and interoperability of data with existing systems. So understanding how EHR works and understanding kind of the standardized protocols like HL7, FHIR, because healthcare is moving towards kind of having that standardization of information. Now, if we're kind of looking for practical projects, what can I start tomorrow? There are kind of sensors out there readily available where you can buy around, heart rate monitoring or things like that. And you can kind of explore these existing standard protocols. Let's say, for example, Bluetooth, that's a field that our company works in, where, kind of transfer of that health information between the patient or the subject and for a target device, showcasing you can kind of interact with that data and interpret the data. That could be kind of a fun little project you can work on.
Okay, I know that I said that was going to be the last one, but oh, sorry, Tara. This also is going to probably go right towards you. So Haley has also messaged, which thank you, Haley. I guess for anyone in general, Tara, you can also answer the previous question. But would you say that most AI models are largely just black boxes? Do you think it'll be important to understand the when I read black boxes, I thought security-wise black box, very different. But do you think it'll be important to understand the math and technical details behind it, either for product development or security?
I would say the math details from a product standpoint would actually be super beneficial. From a security standpoint, I am unsure. I am not a math person. I am awful at it, and I feel like AI math is, my brain is saying it's quantum math. I don't know how true that is, but it feels that way. So again, from a model standpoint, understanding how those models are built, and again, getting back into the integrity aspect of it, like how is it getting that data? How are you verifying the inputs and the outputs of that is actually, especially the inputs and outputs are both probably equally critical. My brain is saying the inputs are more critical than the outputs because if you are getting crap data in, it's going to shoot crap data out, like no matter what you do, unless you have checks and balances in place to verify that data before it becomes an output, which some places do, and by some auditing standards, you have to have processing outputs. So, processing verification before you run outputs. So there is that, but yeah, understanding where it's coming from, how's it being processed, how's it being output, what are your checks and balances in place for that, how are you validating that data would be where I would check from more of a security standpoint. And a lot of this is not your traditional security, if you will. It's more of your hand wavy security that kind of gets lost. And it falls under somebody's just random engineering bucket, but I'm happy to talk more about what that could look like.
Thank you. All right. I think that it hits all of our questions. I want to thank y'all again for staying on and staying over a little bit. I really appreciate it. Again, another shameless plug. If you want to continue the conversation on our Slack, here is our link. And with that, once again, thank you to all the speakers. Thank you to Chicago for helping set this up. I hope to see y'all at another event. And if the speakers and the Chicago directors could stay on for just like a couple minutes afterwards, everyone, you are all free to go, and I will probably kick you off in a couple seconds. And for those